Hi again, this is Mr. Hutchings with Mr. Hutchings History. When you picture medieval Africa, what comes to mind? For many people, the images are vague, perhaps deserts, jungles, or villages. But between 1200 and 1450, Africa was home to empires of extraordinary wealth and cultural power. Caravans carried tons of gold from the mines of West Africa across the Sahara to markets in North Africa. Kings like Mansa Musa of Mali became legends for their riches and generosity. On the Swahili Coast, cities like Kilwa and Mombasa thrived as trading hubs where African, Arab, Indian, and even Chinese merchants exchanged goods. In the highlands of Ethiopia, Christian rulers carved entire cathedrals directly into rock, blending faith and artistry. This is the story of state building in Africa between 1200 and 1450, a story of kinship and kings, trade and tribute, Islam and Christianity, and cultures that shaped the global tapestry. Africa is an immense and diverse continent. Its climates range from deserts to savannas, rainforests to mountain highlands. Geography shaped politics. Instead of one centralized empire, Africa saw a mosaic of states, city-states, and kin-based societies. Earlier empires like Ghana, from the 5th to 11th centuries, had pioneered trans-Saharan trade. But by 1200, Ghana was in decline. In its place rose the Mali Empire, soon to become one of the wealthiest kingdoms in the world. To the east, along the Swahili Coast, maritime trade brought African societies into the orbit of the Indian Ocean economy. And in the Horn of Africa, Christian Ethiopia stood as one of the world's oldest Christian kingdoms, proudly maintaining its independence despite surrounding Muslim powers. Africa in this period was deeply connected to global networks. Islam spread through trade and scholarship. Gold from Mali circulated as far as Cairo and Venice. Swahili merchants traded with Arabia, India, and even China. Yet African societies also maintained unique cultural traditions, such as the griots, oral historians who preserved memory through storytelling. Much of sub Saharan Africa was organized not into centralized states, but into kin based societies. Small villages and clans governed themselves through councils of elders. The eldest male, or chief, acted as mediator and leader. As populations grew, kin based networks sometimes strained under pressure, leading to conflict and eventually more formal states. A good example comes from the Hausa kingdoms in West Africa. By the year 1000, the Hausa people formed 7 loosely connected city-states. These were not centralized under one king, but linked through trade and culture. They thrived on trans-Saharan commerce in salt, gold, and textiles. By the 14th century, Islam had arrived via merchants and missionaries, adding another layer of unity and legitimacy. This transition from kinship to kingdoms is an important theme in AP World. It shows how societies evolve as populations grow and as trade networks demand stronger political organization. The most famous African empire of this period was Mali. Founded by Sundiata, probably said that wrong, I'll try it again. Sundiata, that's probably right, Sundiata Keita, around 1235. Mali replaced Ghana as the dominant West African power. Sundiata, known as the Lion Prince, was both a skilled military leader and a statesman. He built alliances with Islamic merchants and used cavalry to defeat rivals. Mali controlled the trade routes across the Sahara, especially the flow of gold. Some historians estimate that Mali provided half of the world's gold supply in this period. Mansa Musa, who we think was born around 1312 and ruled until 1337, the most legendary ruler of Mali, a devout Muslim. Mansa Musa made a pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324 that stunned the world. Traveling with a caravan of thousands, he distributed so much gold in Cairo that it depressed the value of gold for years due to its oversupply. Musa returned with architects and scholars building mosques and Quranic schools across Mali, especially in Timbuktu, which became a major center of learning. His reign symbolized the blending of African kingship with Islamic faith and connected Mali more closely to the wider Muslim world. Agriculture remained the foundation. Millet, sorghum, and rice were staple crops. Mali's wealth, however, came from controlling trade in gold, ivory, and enslaved people. Social structures included nobles, free farmers, artisans, and enslaved people, often war captives or debtors. There came a decline. After Mansa Musa, Mali weakened due to poor leadership and rebellions. In 1433, the Tuareg seized Timbuktu. By the late 1400s, the Songhai Empire rose to replace Mali. Mali was not the only state in West Africa. Kanem-Bornu, near Lake Chad, had adopted Islam by the 11th century and peaked in the 13th. It controlled trans-Saharan routes and expanded Islam into new territories. The Hausa city-states, as mentioned, became known for textile production, leatherwork, and trade. By the 15th century, Islam had become their official religion. These examples showed the diversity of African political systems. Centralized empires like Mali, city-states like Hausa, and kingdoms like Kanem-Bornu all coexisted. Moving east, we find a different story: the rise of Great Zimbabwe and the Swahili city-states. Great Zimbabwe, built on agriculture, cattle herding, and gold trade. Their rulers taxed goods transported through their territory, linking inland mines to coastal ports. At its height, Great Zimbabwe controlled a powerful trade network connecting to the Swahili Coast. The city was famous for its stone walls, especially the Great Enclosure, a monumental architecture built without mortar. By 1450, it was abandoned, likely due to overpopulation, resource exhaustion, and shifts in trade routes. In the Swahili Coast, a series of city-states along modern Kenya, Tanzania, and Mozambique, cities like Kilwa, Mombasa, and Mogadishu thrived as Indian Ocean trading hubs. Swahili culture itself was a blend. Bantu language plus Arabic influence resulted in the Swahili language. Islam became widespread, connecting the coast to broader Muslim trade networks. Archaeological evidence shows Chinese porcelain in Swahili cities, proof of their global connections. These East African states highlight how trade shaped political development, tying African societies directly into the Indian Ocean economy. In the Horn of Africa, a very different story unfolded: the endurance of Christian Ethiopia. Christianity had spread into the region as early as the 4th century through the kingdom of Aksum. By the 13th century, Ethiopia remained a Christian kingdom surrounded by Muslim states. Its rulers claimed descent from King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, giving them biblical legitimacy. King Lalibela, around the early 1200s, ordered the construction of 11 rock-hewn churches carved directly into stone, representing holy sites of Jerusalem. They still stand today as UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Ethiopian Christianity blended biblical faith with African traditions, including ancestor veneration and unique rituals. Despite pressures from Muslim neighbors, Ethiopia preserved its Christian identity, showing the persistence of local religious traditions amid global changes. African societies were culturally rich and socially diverse. Kinship, age grades, and gender roles organized daily life. Men often worked in specialized trades like blacksmithing, while women handled agriculture, food production, and domestic labor. Slavery existed in multiple forms. There was chattel slavery, where people are treated as property. There was domestic slavery, household servants, and debt bondage, people enslaved to pay off their obligations. The Indian Ocean slave trade exported East African slaves called Zanj to Arabia, India, and Mesopotamia. The Zanj Rebellion, beginning 1869 and lasting until 1883, where 15,000 enslaved Africans who were captured in Basra in Iraq, remains one of history's largest slave uprisings. There were oral traditions. History and culture were preserved by griots and griotes, the ladies, storytellers and musicians who passed down knowledge through generations. They held immense authority, serving as living libraries. Music, drumming, and art carried spiritual and social meaning, influencing African societies then and now. Africa's states were not isolated. Trans-Saharan trade linked West Africa to North Africa and the Mediterranean. Indian Ocean trade tied East Africa to Arabia, India, and China. Merchants exchanged gold, ivory, salt, textiles, spices, and enslaved people. These networks spread not only goods but also Islam, literacy, architecture, and technology. Between 1200 and 1450, Africa was a continent of diverse and powerful states. Mali's gold wealth astonished the world. Great Zimbabwe demonstrated monumental architecture. The Swahili Coast showed global maritime connections. Ethiopia preserved an ancient Christian heritage. For AP exam purposes, these examples provide excellent evidence for governance, cultural developments, trade networks, and religious blending. They also remind us to look beyond Europe and Asia when telling the story of the medieval world. In the global tapestry of 1200 to 1450, Africa was a vibrant thread, golden, diverse, and deeply interconnected. In our next lecture, we'll turn to Europe, a region moving from feudal fragmentation towards centralization, crusades, and cultural rebirth. Until then, stay curious, because history matters.